So I believe we should start. We have a number of 15 participants already, and because we are keeping time, people have kept time. We want to keep this to 1 hour as possible, as much as possible. So hello and welcome everybody. I wish I could see all of you, but that doesn't matter. It's okay. Welcome to our third meeting. Welcome to our meeting today. We have with us 2 people who have volunteered their time to come and share, talk to us about this issue that is a pressing issue in Uganda, and that most people are not aware actually that is a problem in our country. The topic today, like you have seen advertised wherever you have seen it, is called alcohol and drug use among teenagers and young adults in Uganda. So I believe that most of us have either have a relative who is struggling with alcohol or struggling with drugs. We have relatives, we have friends, or at least we have heard about somebody who is going through this experience. So we hope that this is going to be a learning experience for all of us, but also I hope that this is going to be the beginning of providing help for people who need the help that they need. So I have a few slides to give us a bit of background as we begin. And I'll go through them quickly. So this first map is a map that is taken from the World Health Organization page. And this map shows the average liters of alcohol drunk per person aged 15 years and above in every country in the world. And what is interesting is that this map, so this estimate is only based on what is called official alcohol, pure alcohol. So the beers, the whiskeys, things that are official, that government is aware of and has control over. However, we know that there are lots of other alcohols that are in Uganda. The tontos, the lira. In every tribe in Uganda, there is some kind of spirit that is taken. And these are actually not even part of these dynamics. So when you look at this map, you'll see that Uganda is one of the highest, Uganda is one of the countries where people drink alcohol most in the world. You look at this, this key on the side, and the darker blue you become, the more alcohol is drunk by the population. And as you can see in Uganda, if they were to distribute all the alcohol that is drunk in this country among people 15 years and older, all of us would be drinking 12 liters of alcohol per year. And that is a lot of alcohol. But you must remember that probably less than half or even less than a third of our population takes most of this alcohol. And so it shows you how much people are actually imbibing in our country. Now, why should we be worried at all? This is also another map from the World Health Organization. And what it's showing is what they call heavy episodic drinking. So people who occasionally drink heavily. And this is focusing on people aged 15 to 19 years old. And if you see where Uganda is, you see we are one of the darker blue countries. This is showing that our young people are actually taking a lot of alcohol. This graph shows the percent of Ugandans 15 years and above with alcohol dependence. Alcohol dependence is the term that most of us lay people know as alcoholism. So we have approximately 3 out of every 100 Ugandans, that is 15 years and above, is dependent on alcohol. In other words, without drinking alcohol, they cannot perform. Normally. They need a boost of alcohol to perform. In the next slide, another reason for us to be worried is data from the whole world that shows deaths from alcohol and drug use among people who are alcohol and drug dependent. It does not even include tobacco. And you see what the mortality is like. The majority of people who are dying from alcohol and drug dependence are in the age group from the age of 15 to 49 years. And I can confidently say that over 95% of the people listening in today are within this age group. And so that shows us why it is really important for us to know about this. And in a country like Uganda, where more than 70% of our population is under the age of 20, it shows you the problem that we have as far as alcohol consumption in our country. Now we need to know that Africa is unfortunately disproportionately affected by alcohol deaths. I want to draw your attention to the red bars in the graphs and then the orange or gold bars. The red bars show the amount of alcohol that is drunk per person in each of these continents. You will notice that Africa drinks less alcohol than the Americas, that is North and South America, than Europe, and than the Western Pacific. However, when you focus on the orange bars, you will notice that the orange bars are showing us deaths that are attributable to alcohol. You'll notice that in Africa, more people are dying from conditions that are related to alcohol than in other continents that even drink more alcohol than they do. So that's another reason for us to be worried. We are disproportionately affected by the negative effects of alcohol. What does alcohol cause? It causes addiction, mental and behavioral abnormalities, destroys the liver, cancers, lots of cancers associated with alcohol, diseases of the heart and blood vessels, injuries from violence, accidents, and social and economic losses to families, individuals, and the society, as we all are aware. Quickly, this graph is just showing us where Uganda lies as far as deaths from cancers related to alcohol. And as you can see by pointer, Uganda is as dark as Russia. So we have a lot of cancers that are related to alcohol in our setting. Finally, I'll show you this slide. This is about drugs. So the question is, we've talked about alcohol. What about drugs? Is drugs a problem in our country? Recently, we read in the paper a situation where children who were attending a birthday party were poisoned by drugs that was put in a cake. And so drugs is actually a real problem in our setting. If you look at this graph that is obtained from Kenya, so we don't have much data on drug use in Africa, unfortunately, so this was the most recent I could get. You can see that for people in the ages of 15 to 17 years old, at least 2 out of every 100 reported ever trying drugs. And then when you look at people in the 18 to 24-year-old age group, 1 out of every 10 has tried drugs, drugs of one kind or another, maybe cat, maybe marijuana, cocaine, heroin, prescription drugs. And this is right in our neighboring country, but it can give you a picture of what is happening here. And unfortunately, students are not protected. Many of the parents believe that because their children are going to a good school, they are protected from drugs during the time they're in school. But what research has shown is completely different. This graph shows data from the United Nations, surveys that were done in the general population and then among students in school, age 15 to 16. So what they found is that among people who use marijuana, the children who are in school, the blue graphs, are taking as much and even more marijuana than children 15 to 16 years in the general population. Meaning even schools are not enough to save our children from the drug problem. It is a reason for us to be worried. So, so that is a preamble to what we're going to talk about today. So today we have with us Bill Bekunda, who many of you know, and if you don't know him, you're going to meet him anyway in the next few minutes. Bill has a very interesting story, which I will not jump into right now, but he's going to give us a very interesting story that starts from really the birth of his experience with alcohol to what he's doing right now to save people from, especially young people, from using alcohol and from using drugs. So Bill, you are very welcome and the floor is yours. I will stop my screen share now.
Thank you. Yes, I am Bill Bekunda. Some of you know me. Those who don't know me, here I am, putting a face to the mystery. The mystery is because some people have heard of me in my former unglorious days as an alcoholic. And I like telling people that with all my education, I would still find myself lying in a trench drunk. So my best qualification that I'm most proud of, that people find strange, is my graduation from a recovery treatment center, which usually people call a rehabilitation center. Why? I was educated and I slept with my degrees in the trench, yet when I came out of the rehabilitation center, here I am. So it is my most prestigious acquisition, if I may call it that, or whatever you want to call it. Yes, my story starts in my senior 2. I'm glad to be sharing stage or props right now with a doctor who understands what I was going through from St. Mary's College, Kisubi, where I joined as one of the very intelligent ones. Let me put it that way. Because I was in Kabale Preparatory, I was the best in my district. That's how I earned myself a place into St. Mary's College, Kisubi. I did not let down in my senior 1 and first term of senior 2 because I was the 3rd best in my class for all the time until the term when I started drinking. And my grades dropped from 3rd to 25th. That was in 2nd term of senior 2. So that was the very first thing that happened to me when I started drinking. I enjoyed it. I wanted to continue drinking, and my grades dropped from 3rd to 25th. And it didn't get any better from there on because now I was more interested in drinking than in studying. I got my first suspension when I was in senior 4. Though they hadn't yet caught me, I was a little bit clever. I knew how to maneuver. And because my grades weren't that bad, they also had benefit of doubt. Then I got expelled in my senior 6. I was studying to be a doctor by the Raymond. Yeah, I was doing PCB, and in between the practicals and the what was it called, theory, there was usually 1 week rest, and I was expelled, you know, of course, also for drinking. I was actually given a chance to redeem myself, and I thought it's better to drink a little bit so that I can be able to express myself better. And you know what happens when you do that. The doctor will explain this. I'm just running through because I know he's going to explain what happens to the brain and all that. So I joined university. I was sent to Germany. I wasted the opportunity. I was supposed to go to England. I drank all the money. They sent me to Russia. Then I ended up in Ukraine, and that is where I studied, and I did international relations. I graduated. You'll notice that I'm running through, but I'm running through for a reason. That's when I graduated, and I came back to Uganda in the year 2003. Now you'll see, it doesn't look like my age, right? But yeah, I might be giving away too much, right? So I came back, and I like that you talked about Russia. I mean, there are so many things you talked about. You talked about Russia and Uganda and the similarity. Now, the similarity in the drinking is there, but the similarity in the response, no, there's no similarity in the way they treat people who drink. Mm-hmm. In Russia, Ukraine, in the former Soviet Union, they actually take care of the drunk. The word for the alcoholic is alcoholic, and if they find you staggering, they'll find you somewhere to rest. They'll pick you up. They'll put you in a cozy place. They'll ask where you stay. They'll drive you home. And they'll say, oh, that's our alcoholic. In Uganda, you are abused, you are beaten, you are shamed, you are name everything negative because I think they have a deep understanding of what the problem is there, but which leads them to enabling, while here, we don't understand what the problem is in Uganda, and it leads people to actually shunning. So the response is different. There, they enable. Here, they shun. The only people who do not enable in our country are the family. The family are confused. They don't know what to do. For instance, I'll tell you, my mother just didn't know what to do until I got so out of hand that she had to bundle me up and take me into rehabilitation without my consent. Because my consent was never given. I was given the best counselors, Dr. Senyonyi, I think, no, she's not a doctor, but she's with Bank of Uganda. There is the late Mungerera, who I think was the best psychiatrist we had at a certain point, and nothing seemed to work. You know, it's like talking to a wall. And then there was a rehabilitation center at that time, which had just started, a Serenity Center. And when my parents when my mother and uncles talked to the director, he's called Marshall Majiriji. He still has a rehabilitation center here in Uganda called National Care Center. There's one in Nabingo and another branch in Bushenyi, for those who cannot access Kampala. And he said, bring that boy in because he does not even understand what he's doing, you know? So they realized this, there was nothing else they could do but bundle me up and take me into treatment. So they put me into treatment, and that was the beginning of my understanding. Why? I didn't understand why I wanted to stop and I couldn't stop. And I still try to explain it to people and they don't know what I'm talking about. They say, no, it's very easy. Why? Because it's easy for them to stop. They don't have a problem. I wanted to stop. I couldn't stop. Nobody believes that I wanted to stop. They think I wanted to continue. And the funny thing was this, I also wanted to stop, but I didn't understand why I couldn't stop. Why? Because I would wake up, I'm in trouble, my body is going crazy. And I would also say to myself before anybody else, I'm never going to drink again. And this is a very common thing you'll hear people talking about. I'll never do it again. And trust me, they mean it. Somehow, an hour, 2, 3 later, when the body is beginning to feel better, I start rationalizing the problem. I start saying, oh, I think I drank too much. I think I drank the wrong brand. I think I was drinking, I should have stuck to beer. Unfortunately, I could not. Why? Because I would innocently slip out of the house, say in my senior 6 or senior 5, I would innocently slip out of the house and say, let me go and sit with my friends and just drink a little bit. When I start drinking, I have intentionally gone for a little bit. I would even say, let me go just drink 1 beer to be with the guys. But by the time I'm done with 1 beer, I'm saying, let me put in at least a quarter of UG. Then after putting the quarter, I'm like, no, I'm not yet there. Let me take a little more. The next thing I know, I wake up in the morning in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing. I didn't understand it myself, but I'm a man and my friends are doing it. So why shouldn't I be able to do it? So I would find reasons and say, no, I just lost it. Or sometimes I would just brush them off and say, leave me alone. It's my life. When I had money, I would tell them, leave me alone. It's my money. Okay. So it kept going south. When I went into treatment, I discovered then that, you know, this problem was not unique to me. There were different people with the same problem. We all come from different places. We do different things, different backgrounds, rich, poor, you know, those who are spoiled, those who were treated like they're in the military, but all of us had the same problem. So there was no sound reason any of us could put to why we actually drink out of hand. And I see it a lot these days because, you know, that's my line of work where people are saying, oh, he was spoiled, or he was traumatized, or he was, yes, it contributes to it, but I think the doctor will explain that. That is not the reason why we drink and lose it. The reason is when I would drink, I lose control. Now, there are people who drink and gain control. You see?
Yeah.
There are people who, when they start drinking, when they reach a certain limit, whether you do what, they will stop there. They'll drink water, they'll go away, they'll escape, they'll do whatever it is, but they will gain control. Then there are people like me. When I drink, I lose control. Meaning, the moment I put in 1 sip, that's it. I'm done. Yes. So basically, yeah, when I got into treatment, I found out that I had a problem. I need to deal with it. And then I decided to be the person that comes out with my story because that's what I had, and share it with people that they may understand what it's about. And, you know, do whatever I can do to help people like me to find a solution, because nobody understands this situation better than the person who is in it or the person who has studied about the condition.
Right.
I think in a nutshell, unless there's something particular you want me to add, that would be the background and the reason as to why you invited me to share, but there is a lot more.
Right, right.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
Thank you very much. That is a fascinating story. I've heard it before, but it's really, really a fascinating story. So a question I want to ask you, Bill. So you say you started taking alcohol as a young O-level student. At what point did your family realize that there was something not right?
I was the first to realize something wasn't right, by the way, because somehow I always was in trouble, yet the people, my friends, I never say them by name,
Right.
but they never seemed to be in trouble. As in, they would decide, they would be like, oh, my parents, they will find out, so they would refuse to go. I would go by force. I mean, I had to get myself drunk. You see what I'm saying? So they knew how to control themselves. Somehow, I just didn't. All I cared about was what it made me feel like. So that I was the first person to realize. I think they started realizing it after they had, because instead of dealing with the problem, this was the solution. Let's send him to Germany. He can't speak the language. you know, it's a different setting.
Alcohol is the same
and
language.
I went there. 3 days, I had already found a spot. I had already found a way to obtain money. Now I knew I'd put my money. So instead of going for language lesson, I would divert and go to, other places. So by the time I was 22, I knew I had a big problem, but I didn't understand it. I kept thinking to myself, I will control it. And until I got into treatment, by the way, I never realized that I couldn't control it. Even when I was taken into treatment, I knew I had a problem, but I believed, and it's such a strong belief, I believed that I could actually control myself. So I think I would say I came to a realization when I was about 25, when I had finished university, but things were still not making sense to me.
Right. Oh, that's really interesting. And you bring out one thing, Raymond, for those who have joined us a little later. So many people that you talk to think alcohol among young people is a problem for those who live, the poorer Ugandans, people who live in the slums and things like that, Katwe and wherever. But Bill, like you've told us, you were in Kisubi. Your parents were able to send you to Germany. So you almost don't fit the prototype for a young person who becomes an alcoholic. And I think this is really important for the people listening in to know that alcohol and drugs know no social status. They don't know about your tribe, your religion. I mean, even priests have become alcoholics. So none of us is immune to alcoholism and using drugs. So we really need to keep that in mind. I'll come to you later with more questions, and I know the audience will want to ask you some questions. But I think let's go to the doctor now and listen to the scientific bit. Let's go to the mind. Because Bill has told us over and over that he knew he had a problem, he wanted to stop, but he could not stop. And yet other people who were drinking with him were able to say, I've had 2 and that is enough, and they'll not drink anymore. Interestingly, as a young child, I met some of my relatives who were really complete alcoholics. And even as a young child in my tender age, I could tell that there was a problem. And so when we went to med school and they taught us something about the genetics of alcohol, which Dr. Raymond is going to talk about, I quickly flashed back to these memories. And I told myself, there is no way you're going to start drinking. I mean, I could see that I had family members who were alcoholic. And I believe that I am a potential for that. So even up to now, I actually do not take alcohol. Maybe a little wine once in 6 months or so, but I'm afraid of alcoholism. So maybe Dr. Raymond will tell us something about alcohol and drugs from the doctor's perspective. Bill, we are going to come back to you, so please stay around, but Raymond, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Lake. I think you're going to have to give me some rights to share, or you could share the screen for me.
Let me share it for you. We've had issues with going back and forth in the past, so if you don't mind, I'll share it.
Please do.
You see it now? And, on the screen share?
Yes, I do.
I'm putting it on screen share as you introduce yourself. Okay.
Right. Okay, thank you very much, and a very good evening to all the participants. Thank you so much for coming on this platform to discuss a monumentally important topic, one that doesn't get talked about much. There are 3 things that I think Sub-Saharan Africa detests talking about. One of them is alcohol and drugs. And because we are not talking about it enough, there is a sense of apportioning blame, like Bill told you. When somebody is struggling with these issues, we get confused as to how to help. And sometimes it's just easier to shun them or send them away. So I'd like to go through what's actually happening at the level of the brain for somebody to develop alcohol or drug addiction. But we'll start from the reasons why. And the reasons are so many, why people initiate, why people start drug use at all. But the common ones you've heard is that people want to have fun. Some people are in pain, they want to forget. Some people do it so that they can function. Sportsmen are fond of doing that. They want to take something so that they can perform. Majority of people though, substance use begins as an experiment. Somebody brings it and you wonder what it feels like and you may want to try. Also, we have the peers that, dare us to try or talk about how nice it was and what experiences they had after using it. And some of those kinds of things are extremely attractive. The young people are a little bit more vulnerable. These are general reasons why people start drugs. But the young people are particularly at risk. And if you see the next slide, young people are generally risk takers. They are risk takers and pleasure seekers because of the nature of being young. You're still developing and your body is reacting in certain ways and makes you feel strong and beautiful and invincible. And you feel you can do anything. And when the older people talk about these things, the young person isn't seeing it from your perspective. You are old and you were born old. And for them, they are forever young. So they are risk takers. The biology supports them doing daring things like skydiving and things like that. But another special thing about young people is that they are socially disconnected, especially for the age group that Miriam was sharing in her slides. 15 to 19 years. Are those children? Are they adults? What are they?
In between.
When they behave a certain way, you said, don't be children. When they try to behave like adults, you tell them, stop it, you're still kids. So they are socially disconnected and they don't have where to go. And sometimes drug using buddies are the best places they can go to. They sometimes are in pain and they want to treat these pains. So they are self-medicators. They'll take these kinds of drugs so that they can feel better.
Next slide.
Yes, please. But it is wrong to think that anybody who starts substance use actually develops dependence or develops addiction. Quite the opposite. The vast majority of people who experiment on things, they never go on to use the drugs. Some of them will go on to use it more purposively, if the occasion demands. These are the people, if we are talking about alcohol, we could call them the social drinkers. These are purposive users. If the occasion demanded, then they could drink, but they could go months without taking anything. And I think, Miriam's been talking about 6 months, she can't, so that is really purposive. A smaller percentage of people will go on to use it more intensively. Now, intensive use, these are also called regular heavy users. Let's ignore the word heavy for a moment. It seems a little bit judgmental.
Yes.
So who are these intensive users? Imagine people who every day, they take a small amount, but they have a pattern to it. It's almost every evening on their way back home, they pick their quota and go home. Those belong in that group. The students, on the other hand, they are intensive users when they are free of alcohol all week long. But once it gets to Friday, then they are drinking on Friday, on Saturday, on Sunday, and then they again go abstinent for another week, and they repeat the sequence the next week. So these would also be intensive users. The final tip of that pyramid you see there is the dependent users. These are now the people who are suffering from alcoholism. The very tip there is a disease. That's the disease group.
Right.
All the other three were not disease, but up there, that's disease. Now I want you to picture another pyramid and superimpose it over this, but turn it upside down. Make the base go up and then the tip come down. In terms of health economics, that is how much dependent use would consume in terms of resources. They are few, but they consume a whole lot of resources. Yet the experimental users are many, but they usually have issues like, getting into fights, getting cut wounds and things like that. Next one, please.
Doctor, before you go to the next slide, I don't know if you're going to answer this. Is it possible for somebody to know in advance whether they are going to remain an experimental user or whether they're going to end up a dependent user? Are you going to cover this? You want to comment on that?
Yes, we'll get to it in a bit.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that pyramid has been talking about alcohol and drugs. Collectively, we usually call these psychoactive substances. Psycho or psych meaning the mind, something that activates your mind. So any substance which when taken activates your mind in those ways, changes your mood, changes the way you think, the way you feel things, and the way you behave, becomes a psychoactive substance. So alcohol, cannabis, cocaine, and all those other drugs, they are all psychoactive because once taken, they will change your mind, the functioning of your mind in those ways. Yeah.
Next slide. Dr. Raymond, you're muted, just a minute.
All right.
Yes, you're back on. Should we go to the next slide?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, so what is it that these drugs actually do? What is it that these psychoactive drugs do to us? Unfortunately, they do good things and bad things to you. So they have both positive and negative effects. And it really just depends on the type of drug and the extent of your use. The extent is that pyramid I showed you.
Yes.
Are you an experimenter? Are you a passive user, intensive, or dependent? So it can be good and can also be negative. That's what makes them very alluring to most people, because there can be some positive effects. Some children in schools will tell you they read better when they have taken something. In fact, many doctors will tell you they operate better when they have taken something. Right.
That's true.
Next one, please. Now, but the real reason we start and continue to use drugs is really because we like what drugs do to our brains. They give us a certain feeling that we want to repeat. And as we'll see in the next slide, if Miriam could go there, the brain has been designed such that you will appreciate rewarding things, things that give you pleasure. You're likely to appreciate them because there's a part of your brain that is specifically designed to make you appreciate them. So we call that the reward system. I don't know if the next slide is that colorful picture which shows you where it is. That's the one. So I am a man, so I cannot tell what color that is. Correct me when I'm wrong, but that looks purple.
It's purple, you're right.
Is it?
It is purple.
Right. My wife always has a good laugh about me guessing colors. So if you see just above the yellow, or inset within the yellow is a curve, like an inverted C. Inside there where the cursor is, that's the reward pathway. Certainly it is not complete because the next arm should reach the blue, should go up and reach and becomes a V, the one that points towards the judgment point. So that's the full reward pathway. It is very close to your center for memory, close to your center for judgment, close to your center for coordination. So picture when you have taken alcohol. Is any of those things paired? Yeah, your memory, you may not remember some parts of the night, your judgment, previously you thought somebody was like this or like that, then suddenly they start to look different. So that's because of the proximity there. But that's your reward pathway. It's there not for psychoactive substances. It's there for what we call natural rewards. Things like food, like love, like nurturing, like sex. Those natural rewards were the ones meant to activate that part of your brain. But once we take psychoactive substances, that's exactly where they go. And they will cause changes, as we'll see in a bit. Let me see the next slide, please. So once you take a psychoactive substance, you will overstimulate that reward circuit, that reward pathway. Once you overstimulate a reward pathway, you produce a certain chemical in your brain called dopamine. It's a very extremely exciting chemical. Once you have a lot of dopamine in your brain, you feel happy, you feel excited, you feel like, you know, that should be your steady state always. So it produces euphoric feelings that people want to repeat. And that's why we usually end up trying to do that, such behaviors again. Next one. Now, just look at these two drums and compare them. Again, the purple one is the amount of dopamine that can be produced, or the amount of pleasure that you can get from natural rewards like eating food or drinking water in this case, or having sex. It will excite your brain, but to that extent. But if you took cocaine or heroin, then the excitement is as big as the one in blue. Is it therefore any wonder that people who have ever used these substances will want to do that again? They want to feel that kind of pleasure again. It is so huge that the natural rewards now seem pointless. So you'll find many people who drink, many people who use drugs, they slowly stop eating, they stop drinking water, they stop, you know, relating with their loved ones and things like that, because that is no longer, it doesn't give them the kind of high that a psychoactive substance can. Next. Now, once the drug has activated your brain to that extent, the brain has its natural mechanisms to try and balance out things. Too much dopamine is not good for the brain. The brain just wants some optimal amount of dopamine. Now the drugs have hit the dopamine to this extent. So what the brain does, it tries to adjust and stop this overwhelming surge of dopamine. It stops producing dopamine, or it reduces the number of receptors so that now the dopamine is there, but it won't give you any effect. The net effect of that is what you see in the next slide. Should the brain try to compensate this surge in dopamine by reducing the amount of dopamine it's producing, or by reducing the number of receptors, and you can't feel the effect anymore, the euphoria, then you have what we call a crash. So if you have taken a drug the night before, the next morning you will look like that. A typical hangover is actually a good example for lower dopamine, because your brain has been trying to work all around to adjust to reduce this huge surge. Now, it is actually this crash here that makes us go back to the substance, because this is a state of dysphoria. It's a bad state. If you've ever had a hangover, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're feeling so bad compared to how you felt last night. So chances are you'll want to, you know, put in a little bit more so that you can get back up. All right.
That's
So
interesting.
the chemical is dopamine.
And that really reflects what Bill told us earlier on. He wakes up feeling really bad and his resolve is crushed immediately. So that really gives us a picture of what Bill was going through. Thank you. Go on.
Right. So why can't people just stop using drugs? I think when Bill was talking, he was saying, I wanted to leave, but I just couldn't. Why couldn't I just stop? Well, when you use drugs for a long time and alcohol for a long time, they change your brain in fundamental and long-lasting ways. They actually do change your brain, and I think I have some images which can illustrate that. Very good. Now, take a look at those two images. There's one which is the healthy brain where you see some red. Now, the red there represents dopamine receptors.
Right.
Dopamine receptors, the yellow represents nutrients and things like that, and the green is dopamine itself.
Right.
So you start from a healthy brain, but with chronic drug use, for example, when you use cocaine for a long time, you will exhaust all the receptors. And these ones can now be demonstrated using a PET scan. That is something called a PET scan. It's a special type of CT scan. So you can see in the diseased brain now there is no more red. That means dopamine has completely overwhelmed the brain. And this is what changes we start to see as people use drugs for longer and longer periods. Let's see the next. And this is a similar kind of picture. You can see that there's a control brain there, which is the normal brain, and then the rest are diseased brains. The last slide, the other side, is for Parkinson's disease. You can see how close it looks with the unaddicted brain. The two middle ones are addicted brain, and the last one is Parkinson's disease. All of them are issues, involving dopamine. So we can very easily demonstrate a diseased brain using a PET scan. So it means when we take drugs and alcohol for a long time, we actually change the brain. We change the chemistry of the brain and even the structure. Next one.
So it's clear that you're telling us that addiction is actually a disease.
Addiction is actually a disease, and I'm still demonstrating it to you visually so you can see. But this is one of my favorite slides, Miriam.
Yes.
Because, and usually when I ask my students, the only thing they say when I tell them to compare this, they only tell me that the third slide there is very disorganized. Yeah, but the middle slide there is one of an addicted brain. The one to my left is a healthy brain. The one to my right is a recovered brain.
This one here.
Yes. I believe you can see some similarities between the normal brain and the recovered brain.
Yes.
So the message for this slide is that addiction, that thing in the middle, is actually treatable. And when we treat it, people go back to near normal. So it's a disease that can be treated.
Okay.
Next slide.
You've made a statement there. I want to stop you at that point. You say near normal. Can you qualify that, please? Because you said it can be treated, but people will go back to near normal, not to normal. Can you please qualify that for the listeners?
Yeah, I guess, later on I would have told you that this is a disease like any other. It's a disease like hypertension. It's a disease like diabetes. It's chronic and it is relapsing.
Right.
It is chronic and relapsing. So there's a chance that people can still go back into use. So when I said near normal, it means that we are managing. It's not something that gets cured. It's something that we manage.
Right. Right.
When you get diabetes, we don't cure your diabetes, we manage it. That's the kind of disease that addiction is.
Right.
This slide is just examples of a few classes of drugs that we take. We classify them according to what they do to your brain or to your central nervous system. Stimulants usually rev up your brain. They excite your brain. Opioids and depressants, they usually slow down your CNS. They slow down your brain.
Right.
So it's very easy to notice a child who has used either one of these classes. If a child uses cocaine, they will be a little bit excited. They'll be all over the place. They are very active. When they use opioids and depressants like alcohol, they seem to get more sedated. They are slowed down. They are not their usual selves. Even moving from here to there becomes an issue.
Right.
Yeah, I think, Miriam, let's go through these slides forward.
Okay.
I want to be able to, we shall provide the slides for the members so that they're able to read. I want you to flip, and then I'm going to tell you which ones have talking points for me.
Okay.
The one for roots, that's important.
Was it this one? Yes.
That one. So these are the various routes through which people take psychoactive substances by swallowing, snorting, smoking, and the rest. Now, the route that you use, how fast it gets the substance to your brain, is how addictive that substance will become. So the kind of substance that gets availed to your brain very fast becomes more addictive. The participants should now ask themselves, which of these is the most dangerous way of taking a drug? Next one, please. Next. Yeah. Did you guess right? Because the fastest action happens through smoking, 7 to 10 seconds.
Wow.
I know most of you believe it's by injecting. That's only the second fastest. By injecting takes at least some 15 seconds. Smoking, because of the wide surface area in your lungs, the drugs get easily carried to your brain. And so it's the most drugs that are taken by smoking usually get to your brains fast. That's why people smoke, and within seconds they are calm.
Right.
He's agitated and then he smokes and he's calm. All right, let's go. The slides again, like I said, will be availed.
Should I go on?
Yes, please go on. Those are just pictures of the possible substances that can be taken. Please go on.
And the listeners should remember that so maybe I'll ask you, Dr. Raymond, this. So where would we put most of our local brews? We have the small spirit type brews, and then the maruas and things like that. Where does marua fall, by the way?
Marua is one of those unquantified local brews, but its percentage is anywhere between 20 and 40%. So it's quite potent.
Right.
But most of our beers are in the first two tall glasses there that you see.
Right.
A light beer is usually something around 3%, and a regular beer is something around 5%. So most of our beers are regular beers, the Guinnesses, the clubs and whatnot. And light beer, we don't have many light beers here.
Right.
And then spirits, yes.
Go on, please go on.
Yeah. So the spirits, now all the local brews that we make, that people take in circuits and things like that, would be spirits.
Right. Okay.
And 30 mils of it, that is one shot, is the equivalent of one standard drink. It's as potent as you taking a full bottle of beer or something like that. But it has even a higher alcoholic content than a beer. So it's usually about 40% by volume.
Right. Wow.
Let's see the next. Next one, please. Those are pictures of stimulants, cocaine, methamphetamine, crack.
Next one.
So you watch out for things that look like salt when you're checking your kids. They carry things that look like Kagadi salt, then you should be a bit worried. And this is this is a very popular one. Some of you are growing this in your backyards, claiming they are for pigs. You want to watch out. That's cannabis, marijuana.
Right.
Yeah.
And you bring a very important point. Some people may actually be growing it for pigs, but their children are aware that this can have a use outside pigs. And so children may be right under your nose using what you're growing for your pigs in the background. So that's a very important point.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So addiction is not a character flaw. It's not a personality disorder. It's not a moral failing. It is a health problem. Next one says it's a disease. The next slide. It's a disease. It's a disease of the brain, one that is chronic and it is relapsing in nature. Let's just go on a little bit. Next one. I've already demonstrated to you using that slide, the one before, Miriam, about the possible changes that can happen in the brain. So when you look up at the top slides, the top two, those are changes in a brain during addiction, yes. And then below you see changes in the heart when there's a problem. And you can see in both conditions, both heart condition and in addiction, you can show, it shows demonstrable changes in the organ. In one being the heart, the other one being the brain. You can see the changes clearly. These biological changes can be demonstrated, which goes on to further re-emphasize that this thing is a disease, the same way you would have a heart disease. Next one. Now, why doesn't everyone who tries a substance become addicted? Well, vulnerability varies from one person to the next. I think Miriam wanted me to talk to the genetics of things. Let's see the next slide. So no two people are the same. Even when you're born in the same family, your vulnerabilities will differ. The environments that will turn on your genes may differ. So as much as half, 50% of people who become addicted to substances actually carry the vulnerability in their genes. So what we inherit is not addiction itself. We inherit a vulnerability. So of all the people out there who are addicted, 50% of them is because their genes, they were carrying a vulnerability to addiction.
Right.
For example, Bill, despite the fact that he was drinking with his friends, many of them never went on to develop addiction, but he did, because his vulnerabilities were different from theirs. Next one.
Right. And as we go to the next slide, you brought out an important point. You mentioned 50%, and that caught me, because that means the other 50%, which is half, do not have the vulnerability gene. So just because you have not seen your relatives or had that your family history, they were alcoholics or drug addicts, does not mean that you are safe. You can easily be part of the 50%.
That is absolutely right, Miriam.
Right.
So let's go on.
Okay.
Now, even carrying the gene, the vulnerability gene alone is not enough. Being vulnerable is not enough. That gene must interact with a special environment in order to cause you addiction. So I could carry the vulnerability gene for addiction, and if the environment is never the kind that turns on those genes, then I may never go on to become an addict. But what is this kind of environment? Next slide. And that's, for me, my favorite. Because when we talk about environment, people usually think that it is something special. It is something very painful, something. No, environment is everything that's around us. It's in our homes, it's in the schools we went to, the neighborhood, our family and friends. Those are the things that turn on our vulnerability genes. At home, the parents are drinking, they are showing you. That's modeling already. That environment turns you on. At school, your friends are the kind that escape and they're bringing in all sorts of drinks. That kind of environment is turning your genes on. The neighborhood, is it the kind that sells drugs openly? Do they scorn, are there people who are trading in it and things like that? How about the culture, your beliefs, the values, the morals that you've been taught? Do they teach you that this is not something that's right and things like that? So those are the kinds of environment that play a big role in turning on your genes. And you move from being a carrier of a gene to developing addiction. I think for me that was very important, Miriam, and I would now like you to find for me slides that talk about family and addiction.
Okay.
The rest of these things, I hope that the participants can read or they can ask me a direct question.
Right. Okay,
Yes.
so here they
Now,
are.
because I know majority of the members in this group are parents, or their brothers, their sisters, to people who may be having challenges with substance use, I want to just make it clear to you that the family is an environment for the person struggling with drugs. And that environment, especially the one of the family, has its peculiarities. In fact, it is a little bit more, more informing than a school environment. Because at home, you want to ask yourself, does this family have a hierarchy? Who is the leader in the home?
Right.
Does everyone, do whatever they want? Is it the father in charge? Is it the mother in charge? Do the kids understand that hierarchy and respect it? Do the parents perform according to that hierarchy? How about the roles? Do people understand their roles? Your role as a child, your role as a brother, your role as a sister, your role as a mother and father. How about the rules? Are they spoken? Are there unspoken ones? Do people recognize them as being rules? Are there consequences? Now, the family is set up such that all these things are supposed to happen. That's what we call family dynamics. Now, within those dynamics, addiction can take place. Next slide, please.
That's powerful, Dr. Raymond.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to end my talk with these codependency roles. So you have a family in which rules and hierarchies have been set out. So we call that a functional family. Then you have a dysfunctional one where nobody really knows their role, nobody knows the hierarchy, the kids can do what they want. That is a dysfunctional family. In both families, addiction can take place, incidentally. It's most likely to take place in a dysfunctional family, though.
Right.
Now, what happens when there's addiction in the family? Each one of us is contributing to that addiction in one way or another. And these are the codependency roles, the roles that individual members of the family unknowingly play that keeps the individual using the substance. And I think the commonest one of them is the one we call an enabler. An enabler is the one who makes excuses for the person using the substance. The one who supports him, the one who gets money and gives him on the side, or her. Even after you've talked as a family, you're drinking too much, then they go behind and give the person money, or they call them to a situation that is extremely compromising, where they know there'll be a lot of alcohol. When you do that, and one of your brothers or your children is struggling with addictions, you are being an enabler. There are some people who are heroes. Now, the hero in the family is that child or that individual who decides to work and try to change that family. So they disconnect themselves from the family, but they strive to be successful. So even in the family of somebody with addiction, you'll find a super successful individual. And that's a response to the problem that's happening within the family. You'll find a scapegoat, the one who always gets into trouble, just so that the attention is drawn away from the individual who is struggling with substance use. And then, of course, you can also have a mascot in the family. Somebody who, when there's tension in the house, they start cracking jokes, they dress funny, they make, they try to make people laugh to diffuse the tension. And some of the children in the family become that person, the mascot. And then the last one is the lost child. There is the one who will be neglected because everybody's attention is on this one person who has a substance use problem. They'll forget. And these are all problems that must be handled. So when you come, we shall assess for all these things. In the family session, we'll assess who is playing what role. So maybe for the members in this talk, we just should go back and reevaluate ourselves and ask ourselves, what am I being for this individual struggling? Am I being an enabler? Am I being a hero? Am I being a scapegoat? I think I'm going to have to stop there, Miriam. I overshot completely, but I apologize.
We were all very, very close to this. Before we leave the last slide, I think two things come up. For those who attended our previous meetings, we talked about the kind of parents in the home. Dr. Raymond said even in structured homes, you can still end up getting alcoholics. And we talked of families where the parenting method is autocratic. So the parent is a dictator in the house. He stops, the children are afraid of the parent. And so because of that, they are not able to approach their parent when there is a problem. When they're going through a problem, maybe they're being lured into alcohol or drugs. So those could easily be situations where in spite of structure, the structure is such that it doesn't make the environment a safe environment for the child. Then from the experience I've had in terms of scapegoats, because you mentioned the codependency, scapegoating as being one of the core dependencies. Found that there are children who become scapegoats because there's so much attention being given to their sibling who is an addict, and they feel ignored. And as a result, they begin to act up and be the scapegoat in the scenario as well. Right. So amazing presentation. Thank you very much. We've got a lot of people asking questions, and so we want to open the floor and let people ask questions. If you have a question, please send it by chat or put up your hand and we'll pick you. I'll stop sharing now.
Right.
You can raise your hand if you have a question. Or you can send the question in the text in the chat. So I want to ask a question to both Bill and Raymond. Bill could start since he's lived through the experience, and then Dr. Raymond would add. So how can a family member or someone in the household tell that there is a problem? Because most of the time users, once they know that they have a problem, begin to become very secretive, the way they do their drugs or take alcohol. So how can a family member, a parent in this case, tell that there is something not right in the house, that there's something not right with their child?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Miriam. Yes, I'll use me as usual for this experience. One, when you have a child, they grow up, they have a certain characteristic. They are maybe jolly, they are playful and all that. All of a sudden, in their teenage years, they start changing. They don't want their friends to be known. They are secretive. They want their space. They don't want to join people on the table, for instance. They are moody. They seem tired most of the time. You know, it's like they sleep during the day. You don't know where they are. There's no accountability for all that. Majority of parents call it growing up. It is the teenage stage. But those are indicators. You do not know what is wrong. In my case, I was using that as a defense so that I could get away with whatever I was doing. Yeah. So those are some of the ways in which they did not bother with me because they thought my parents didn't bother. They thought he's acting up, he's missing out on something. You know, he wants to be present, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I got away with it. And then in my later years, I started becoming defensive. I knew whom to smile with. I knew whom to back at. I knew whom not to talk to. I knew whom to run away from. Basically, my every move was calculated because all I wanted to do was to protect my ability to do what I wanted. And what I wanted was to go out, drink, and have fun. Because to me, drinking was not a problem, by the way. It was a solution. Right. Now, to everybody else, it was a problem.
Yeah.
So people were trying to separate me from my solution because they would tell me, "Can't you see it's destroying your life?" No, when I would drink, I would feel happy. How can you tell me it's destroying my life? You see what I mean? So what was real to me was a problem. Now I know it was a problem because it was my escape. You know, I had something I had to run.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And you bring up a component and you said, for a number of parents, when the teenager is in their room, they think there is a teenager being a teenager. I remember I was talking to someone I know who has brought up really well-rounded children. They're now adults. And I asked them what are the tricks that they use. And he said one of the things in their home, children were not allowed to hang out in their bedrooms. You leave the bedroom in the morning, you go back when you're going to bed or you're going to change out of your clothes. Everything else you do either on the compound or in the room where everybody can see you. So that brings a really strong component. Do we always, even when the children are at home, do we know where they are? Do we know what they're doing in those places, in the bedrooms, which is now the in thing? Every child has their own bedroom and they hang out there most of the time.
Yes, let me just add in there these three things which I tell people to remember. Monitoring, bonding, and boundaries. Right. Many of the parents today bond. They say, oh, my child is my friend. They tell me everything, but then they don't monitor them. They say, oh no, they're growing up. You know, even as we went through this thing. Right. People, what you don't understand today is that the era we are living in is totally different. Absolutely. I say, many survived in my generation because all we had to suffer with, I mean, the things we had were weed and kasese. Today, we have got all kinds of drugs. There is a concoction of heroin which goes for about 5,000 shillings. And you don't even have to drink it, smoke it, or anything. You burn it and sniff in the what? The fumes.
Right.
That easy, you see. So, and you know, some of these things are highly addictive. You know, they create cravings. And we have also had, the doctor might tell us, that there are drugs which are on the market which are actually created intentionally to create cravings.
Yes.
That's the target, you see. And so you take 2 times, and I've had people in the rehabilitation center telling me, no, you take 3 times and you're done. You'll want to have it. You see what I mean? So there is so much to be worried about today than there was to worry about then. So bonding, boundaries, no, you have to tell them what to do, what not to do. Yes. And then monitoring, you have to know where they are. Who are they with? Don't just take it for granted that they have gone and everything will be okay. You know, they're growing up, they can do it. It is like, let me call it, I call it gambling. It is gambling.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
You bring in a very strong point. You know, these days, even when the child is physically at home, they can be all over the world with the internet right now. So in the past, if there was weed, many of us grew up and I never saw weed until I was in medical school doing psychiatry. But now with things like the internet, social media, the market is right in the hands of your child. So it's a completely different scenario we have right now. Let me take a question from one of our guests, and just a moment. So Matthias, can you ask your question?
Just
Matthias?
a minute, let me, am I unmuting?
Yes, you're unmuted. Matthias, yes, we hear you.
You can hear me now.
Yes.
Thank you so much, all the presenters. I have 2 questions. One, what are the chances of recovery? And 2, how much time does it normally take? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's have Dr. Raymond answer the chances of recovery, and then Bill, from his experience, tell us how much time it took him.
Right. Thank you very much, Matthias. And I've seen also a couple of other questions. Miriam, if you don't mind, may I just add on to what Bill said?
Absolutely.
That there are many ways that we can notice that a child in the family is using drugs. Some of them is just sheer observation. You want to be able to look at them, check their skins. Are there marks that you don't understand? If they're injecting drugs, there'll usually be needle marks. Initially, they'll try to inject in places you can't see, but the longer they continue, you know, they'll start to find vessels, you know, that are even smaller and more visible. Unexplained boils on the skin, those are needle abscesses. You want to be able to look out for that. Running nose, constricted pupils, sudden, you know, episodes of extreme aggression and agitation. You know, something small sparks them off a big deal. You must be able to pay attention to that. And then you watch other behavioral things, as Bill has just told you. So for Matthias's question, the chances of recovery. So think about alcoholism or substance use disorders as NCDs. You're looking at NCDs, non-communicable diseases, like hypertension, like asthma, like diabetes. So these are things we want to control. And I think Bill will tell you that people recover. We do recover. But remember, in our definition of what addiction is, it's a chronic and relapsing. So it runs a long course, and at any point in your life, there's a chance that you could get back into the addiction. In the slides, I didn't talk about them, but you'll have something called a lapse, going back just one time, and a relapse, going back to previous patterns of use. Now, that's the one we fear, the relapse. Some parents get very, you know, they run immediately, there's a lapse, but there's a lapse and then there's a relapse. So the chances of recovery are really good, Matthias, if you can get them to be treated. Let me just address the 2 that I also saw earlier. How do you encourage parents to stop addiction? if you are the child, you must be able to be open enough and explain what the effects of that addiction is, is causing to the rest of the family. Tell your father or your mother how you feel about it. Have an open discussion. Find out resources. Escort them to the caregiver. Give them the kind of support. We call that recovery capital. Be their recovery capital. Because them thinking they need help is just one thing. And then the final question was, why do cheap liquor, why are they more addictive? Well, we would want to imagine that the cheap liquor, we've not put enough control. So they have a lot of impurities, and these impurities drive up the addiction potential and the alcoholic levels, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Raymond. I don't see any other hand up. I will ask, there's a question in the chat. Dr. Raymond, sorry, Bill, as you answer the question about how long it took you to reach a point of recovery, please add to it this question. The person's question is there one thing that you found key in your treatment? And if I can add my own bit to it, something you found key, both positive and negative.
Thank you. Well, the first thing is that when I got into treatment, I got to understand my problem. Before that, I just did not know. It's like if you're drowning, you do not know you're drowning. You're just trying to survive, you see, and nobody can instruct you on how to stay afloat once you're drowning.
Right.
Yeah. Now, my recovery, there is no time. It's not curative. Like the doctor has been saying, there is no medication you are given. This is mind changing. We are saying that your brain was thinking in this direction. Now they are changing it to think in the normal direction like other people. That is why you find that everybody would be telling me, Bill, can't you see that this thing is affecting your life? Can't you see that it's causing you problems? Can't you see it's embarrassing you? That's what they were saying, the normal direction. For me, I was looking at it the other way. It makes me happy. It makes me lose my worries. It makes me feel good. What are you talking about? So what they were thinking was not what I was thinking. And until I got to understand my problem and realize that there are people like me who think exactly that way, and we are all thinking the wrong direction, plus the counseling and the insistence, we who are in counseling, and I'm a recovery coach, it's about insisting, persisting, and showing them, by example and by words. Then we have the psychiatrists, we have the psychologists, we have the name it. Everybody has got a role to play to make the person understand. And you see, part of addiction is not drinking. I actually say the alcohol doesn't cause addiction. I say the habit is the one that causes an addiction. That's in layman's language. It can be misleading. I don't want to pin it, but I'm saying that the habit itself, it becomes a pattern. And I'll give it to you in this form. You never forget, you create a pattern of action, say, yes? You will not forget it. It remains there, right? Now, when you are in recovery, you're creating a new pattern on top of the old one. And the old pattern is not going away, yes? Since it's not going away, you're just learning afresh. And when you're learning afresh, it's like going, if you use Tukabale and now they put you in Beijing, there are better opportunities in Beijing, but because you're uncomfortable with the new way of life, you don't know the language, you don't know the lifestyle, it is uncomfortable for you. You prefer to stay in Kabale.
Right.
That is what the doctor was talking about. When it comes to relapse, you just reactivate the old pattern, which does not go away. Right. But those are all whole topics, and I think you should find a way of explaining them one by one. Maybe you should make this more of a daily thing.
Another episode on this.
Yes.
And you bring out a very good point, which I'll link to Dr. Raymond. So in our mentoring of young minds programs that we run on Saturdays, one of the things we are telling the young people in this program is that most people get addicted as young people, teenagers and people in their 20s to mid to late 20s. And it's really because their brains are still developing at that point. And if you create this habit, you're drinking all the time, the brain is going to think this is a very important function because it's happening a lot. And so it's going to retain the nerve connections in your brain concerned with that, and will actually make them more efficient. And so it is easy to relapse because that is a part of your brain that has been well conserved for that function. So young people, it is really critical that you stay away from alcohol, stay away from drugs while you still have the time. We have a question from somebody. I don't know what her name, his or her name is. Their phone is a Techno. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Your hand was up. As we wait for them, I want Dr. Raymond and Bill to talk about this. So from the experience I've had with a number of parents is that there's a lot of stigma surrounding substance abuse. And it's contributing to the reason why many people are not taking their children or their loved ones to seek care. And this is happening a lot, especially among the well-to-do families. Those that can afford are taking their children abroad, and yet there are services that are available to in Uganda. Can you speak to the stigma and then also tell us a little bit about the services that are available in Uganda? Where can people find them? I know there are many, but tell us the ones you're familiar with. Let's start with Dr. Raymond, then we'll come to Bill.
Right. Thank you, Miriam. So stigma is real in anything that happens in an organ that people don't see.
Mm.
So basically all the brain conditions will be stigmatizing. And that's because whatever is happening in there, people don't see it. They are not aware of how it is happening. So we would rather, make fun of it and ridicule it than, go in to try and understand it. But in terms of substance use, you have two forms of stigma that we should be able to look out for.
Mm.
There is the self-stigma. The individual sufferer starts to attach negative labels onto themselves.
Mm.
Oh, I am no good. I'm a society reject. Nobody loves me. All those kinds of things. It affects their health-seeking behavior as well. Once they start to feel like that, then they're unlikely to come and seek care.
Mm-hmm.
The one that we are usually more acutely aware of is the external stigma or the social stigma. The one that comes from the relations we keep, what they talk about us, the kind of name you have out there, what people are writing about you on Facebook, and things like that. All these are forms of stigma. And sometimes that kind of external stigma, that social stigma, drives the felt stigma, the self-stigma, even further. And that is a big tumbling block in health-seeking behavior for most people. So for us, when you come into care, stigma is one of those things that we address. We want to talk about it. We want people to be able to, for me, Bill is my hero.
Yeah.
Because what he's doing is actually destigmatizing addiction care.
Yes.
So if we had more Bills coming out to talk, share that, even the ones which are not entirely successful stories like Bill's, they should be talking so that we learn from it, so that we know what to change.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that is about stigma. And Bill can tell us about services.
Before Bill, just a second before you go there, Dr. Raymond brings in a very strong point. So most of the time, we who are the onlookers, the people looking in from outside, we stigmatize this person and we do not realize that actually they are suffering within. Because like Dr. Raymond has said, there's self-stigma. This person hates themselves because they cannot stop. And Bill, you shared you wanted to stop, you could not stop, and then you end up hating yourself. So we need to come to these people with empathy. Let's realize that they are struggling as well. And let's not levy judgment on them. It is a disease. Let's not levy judgment. Let's look out for ways to help. Bill, over to you.
Yes, stigma is something that I got used to. It's like saying that you get used to it and it becomes normal. Like they beat you all the time. You know that what's the worst that's going to happen? They'll beat me. What's the worst that will happen if I drink again? They'll make noise, but they'll still serve me soup. But stigma is real because people fear to talk. I mean, there are so many people that have helped, but very few people will come out and say, you know what, I had this problem and I'm going to do something about it. And in my case, I have been fighting the one stigma because it's the biggest thing. Why do I have to explain myself about alcohol anyway in the first place? You see, the kind of t-shirts I wear, I put on, you booze, you lose, intoxication, you lose direction. I am also making my side of my story normal. I mean, you cannot be glamorizing it. And for me, I also succumb to it. No, I am trying to make a better world for my offspring, because like the doctor said, they have it in their genes. They could be carriers, and if they introduce it into themselves, who knows? So I have to create an environment that enables them to survive, and you know what, by destigmatizing. Now, I think I've forgotten the other question you had asked, but it is the services.
Yes.
Now I am a recovery coach at Safe Places, Uganda Treatment Center, which is one rehabilitation center, but there are many other rehabilitation centers in Kampala. There is Hope and Beyond, which is in Rubaga. There is Serenity Center, which is in Entebbe. There is Tranquil Homes, which is in Entebbe as well, in Entebbe town. Serenity Center is along Entebbe Road. There is Maple somewhere, I don't know. There is now a fresh new teenage rehabilitation center for teenagers, you know. It opened, I think, last week, where now we can at least send teenagers who are becoming troublesome. If you start noticing something is not right, we can send them there. There is Butavika National Referral Hospital, which has got the brains, it has got so many resources, but there's a lot of stigma surrounding it. They say, oh, there are madmen there. Oh, it's for crazy people. You know, we have Dr. Raymond. How many people know him? But we'll know the surgeons, we'll know the pediatricians, but for him, he'll be left there only for those who feel desperate. You see what I'm saying? So the services are there in Mulago Hospital where he is. The services, I've said a few. There is ARC rehabilitation in Bukoto. There is, I don't know if I can mention them all, but now even we have seen that we reached the step of rehabilitation. But after rehabilitation, like we say, it's a lifelong problem. I am living in recovery. I do not say Bill recovered. I say I'm an alcoholic in long-term recovery. It's the Christians who don't like those words because they say, oh, self-condemnation. Sorry, I am an alcoholic in long-term recovery, because it's like saying if I am diabetic, I am diabetic.
Right.
If I tell you I am diabetic and I'm in recovery, nobody will. The stigma is that if you say you're an alcoholic, that's self-condemnation. Alcoholic and diabetic, actually, they even rhyme. The symptoms are almost the same. The management is the same. You're both doctors, right? You agree with me, right?
Yes, definitely.
So basically, we need to first and foremost understand these things. And then now, I was telling you that there are other services like after rehabilitation. What happens? Now, rehabilitation centers offer aftercare programs, but there is one thing we have not been having, which are recovery houses, recovery homes, whereby somebody who comes straight from the rehab goes back to the dysfunctional family, and then they are led to relapse again. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I have started recovery homes where we take in now people who are transitioning from the treatment center, and we get them prepared to get into the real world. So what happens there is that they come to these homes. They have things like curfew. They're supposed to be in by 7. They can only leave after 7 in the morning. They have access to counselors, and they have access to their peers to encourage one another. And it is a lot cheaper than rehabilitation. So during the daytime, they can actually do whatever it is they want to do, if they are going to school and all that. Then we provide them with things like occupational therapy. We encourage them, we put them to tasks and say, if you don't have a job, try finding a job within the 3 months that you're going to be with us. Start on it so that we can see your progress. We discourage relationships, as in it's basically nurturing kind of a person to start and regain their position in society. Now, this is new. I don't know how it's going to work, but it will have to work one way or the other, you know, because it is something that we need. Now, what we need more is people talking about this problem.
Absolutely.
And I remember the first time, I'll just finish with this. The first time, it was in 2015. And one of, there was, what are they called, a writer? The one who writes stories in the newspapers. Yes, that one. He called me and he said, it seems you have an interesting story. Can I interview you about, your problem? Because I used to write about it on Facebook. And I said, bring it on. So he asked me questions and I told him things that he could not even believe. He was like, okay, this is madness. You talk about things like you sleep in a bar, you pee on yourself, people see these things happening, right? But nobody can. I say I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
You relate to the one you know. There is no difference. And the editor at the time asked the question and said, how much did you pay this guy to give you such a story? And the guy said himself, I was surprised myself at how much he was revealing.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? But that is because I know, first and foremost, you cannot use against me what I've freely shared.
Yes.
That I'm set free, right?
The
Now
secret is out there, exactly.
Exactly. Those are ways in which you can break stigma. Another thing, it makes me accountable. You see, I am protecting myself from relapse.
Yes.
Anybody who sees Bill, first maybe some of them start explaining why they are drinking. They say, oh, no, me, I'm drinking just one. I haven't asked anything. Bill is going to come with his lectures about smoking.
Yeah.
I am putting people on guard just by my presence because they know from, yes, you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And it has encouraged people to come out, seek help, ask for help. And anyhow, we just keep doing whatever we can. So there are services. If anybody needs to be connected to whatever kind of service, please feel free to come through you, Dr. Miriam, to me, and I will show them where to go. I will give them advice. I'll give them my experience, and we shall make a difference. I'm sure we shall make a difference.
Fantastic. So once again, if you want to get it, so Dr. Raymond and Bill have dedicated their lives to working with people with suffering from addiction. So please, if you need to reach out to them, I'm going to send the email that you should send your request to, and I will definitely connect you to them. Let me know who among them you'd like to reach, and I'll connect you to both of them. They've dedicated their lives to this, and please let us not allow their work to be in vain. I'll take one more question. We are running out of time. There is someone whose hand is up. Your phone calls you administrator's iPhone. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. It's going to be our last question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miriam. I'm a young adult. I have a question that I would want you to help me with. I have an alcoholic father, and I want to know how I can be able to deal with him, since he looks at me as an enemy and he has tendencies of trying to hurt me. How can I deal with him?
Wow. Thank you for being open and asking that question on this forum. I'm going to ask Dr. Raymond and Bill each to answer, give her whatever help you can give in 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you introduced yourself as young adult. I can imagine that's a difficult situation for you. I'm wondering whether there's been any forms of abuse, because when people are suffering from alcoholism, sometimes they become physically abusive, emotionally abusive. Those are things you want to be able to watch out for, and please be courageous enough to report in the right channels, because eventually they can become, lifelong damages for you. In terms of being able to help him, it helps to engage trusted colleagues and people that he views as being authority figures. Is that how you call it, Miriam?
Yes.
People within his ranks,
yes.
First to start the conversation. Sometimes even somebody older, like your grandmother or your grandfather, you want to share with them. You want to make sure you get your mother to be the one to broach this subject. See if you're the kinds of people who call up family conferences and ask for immunity during the family conference, so that you're all able to say whatever is on your mind without repercussions, and then you bring up the subject. Otherwise, you could also, get in touch with a counselor and people like that, and you could, introduce the subject to him. of being able to seek help.
Right.
But at this moment, I want you to do some self-preservation first. Make sure you're not being harmed,
Right.
and you're keeping quiet about it. Right.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr.
Yes.
Raymond.
I would say the same. Only that I'll just add that seek professional help. If you cannot get the person who is suffering the problem of addiction to get help, you be the one to get help. Go find somebody who understands something to do with addiction and recovery. Like I've mentioned, there are so many places you can even start from here. Find out, how do I deal with it? How do I manage? Like the doctor has already told you, Raymond has told you, safeguard yourself first. Do something about it before it becomes bad. But after that, find out, how do I deal with it? If your car has a problem, you don't leave it behind and say, you know what, this car is having a problem, let me ignore it. You will look for a mechanic, or you'll call your friend, like the doctor said, and say, my car is making some funny sound, what do I do? And they'll say, take it to the mechanic.
Right.
That is what we need to do as well with our lives. You see something that is not okay, and you have said you cannot tell the car, go to the garage. You cannot take the car to the garage. You'll call the mechanic to come to your home.
Yes.
So what you can do right now is seek for help. You can find me. You can find the doctor. You can go through Dr. Miriam, and she'll show you where to go. And then you sit down and discuss the problem, make an assessment of what is happening, and you can get very good advice on where to start from and the following procedures. And
Amazing.
it will go eventually.
Amazing.
Yes, it will go.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Raymond brought
Welcome.
a very key component. Addiction is very traumatizing for the people who have to live with it. Like I gave you my short story, my experience with some relatives who were alcoholics. I didn't actually live with them, but just the few times that I encountered them, I mean, that was enough to sear a memory on my mind. So if you're living with someone who is an alcoholic, you need help as well. The person needs help, but you also need help. And that is the best way you'll be able to help them. There's one more person who has a question. Unfortunately, Jonathan, we need to wind up. Kindly send your question on the chat, and I will pass it on to the Dr. Raymond or Bill to answer in future. One person says, in spite of helping people who are addicts, some of them deteriorate and die prematurely. I mean, earlier on in the presentation, I showed some statistics that showed that alcohol and drugs promote premature death. There are lots of diseases and diseases that result from using alcohol and drugs, and sometimes situations that arise because of alcohol and drug dependence. Violence, accidents, and all those are things that can lead to death as well. So addiction is a real problem. Those who were here earlier, we showed that Uganda, alcohol intake in Uganda is one of the highest in the world. A lot of conditions that are resulting because of alcohol. Young people in our country are taking a lot of alcohol. Many of them are dependent. About 2 or 3 out of every 100 young person 15 years and older is dependent on alcohol in Uganda. So we need to take steps to end drinking, underage drinking. We need to stop drugs. Schools, you need to think about the grab policy. I know a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but students have told me about taking drugged cookies to school and spiked quencher. You know, there's drugs in their quencher. So schools are going to need to be very creative about how they monitor the students in school. I mean, someone carries a bag of salt to school, you think it is salt, and yet it's one of these other drugs we've seen. So it's a big problem. Parents, remember boundaries, bonding, and monitoring. We've talked about that. So there's a lot to discuss. This could have gone on for several hours, but we need to wind up. Thank you very much for joining us. Next month, we're going to talk about sex and adolescence. And the psychiatrist will tell you that sex is also an addiction, right? There are people who are actually sex addicts as well. And I know that Bill is working also to stop pornography among especially young people. So a month from now, we're going to have a discussion on sex and adolescence. Please let the young people also attend. They should not only hear by hearsay. Let them be here, let them listen to what is going on and how to keep themselves safe. Thank you very much for coming. Young people, tomorrow morning we'll meet from 9 to 10 a.m. mentoring young minds. We are stage 2 of self-audit. You're welcome to join in, register in time so that we will not throw you out of the program. For those who came in later, Bill and Dr. Raymond are doing this for free. They are on this program for free. I have not paid them, but like I've said, they've dedicated their lives to make our world a better place. We are going to fight addiction together. We're going to fight the stigma together. If you need their contacts, just send an email to Care360. I've sent the email address to you, and I'll link you up to them. So just to wind up, Bill, I'm going to ask you to say something in 1 minute, and Dr. Raymond, say something in 1 minute, and then we'll call it a day.
Well, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to add because there is too much to say. But what I'm saying, the only thing I can say and tell people is, if you have a problem and you don't know what to do about it, find somebody that can give you a solution to the problem, because you cannot do everything. We have tried to help our own people. We have failed. I mean, after I got out of my problem, I now became I started looking after people with a problem, you see. So basically we are saying that do not keep quiet about a problem, find a solution for the problem. That's what I can share. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for accepting to come. Dr. Raymond.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. For me, I think my parting shots is to continue the loud shout that addiction is actually a disease. And if the members here will go with any message today, it should be that addiction is a disease like any other chronic and relapsing disease. We are not going to cure it. Many parents have come to me and they think I have a magic cure. Give us that one pill that takes it all away. That's not how it works. We work by supporting you and managing you on a continuous basis. So I am very grateful for this opportunity to be able to share what we learned. And I encourage all the members in this group to become advocates and to become ambassadors for the fight against alcoholism and drug use. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And everyone, thank you once again for coming, and have a lovely evening. See you, young adults. See you tomorrow morning, and everyone else will meet again in 1 month's time.
See 1 month's time.
Everyone.
Yeah. God bless you all.
God bless you too.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.